Charlie K and I are here, and we have a very special guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sammus, and I'm a producer and rapper and PhD student here in Ithaca, New York.
Cool. Glad to have you here for VIC's 50-hour marathon. So you recently released an EP titled Infusion. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yes. So the project that I released prior to that was in May of 2014, and it was kind of like a video game inspired EP. So I knew that the next project that I came back with had to be something that kind of explored something different and really elaborated on who I am as a person. So this EP, I spent basically a year recording with my friend, my homie, sound engineer Sosa, who lives in Queens. Yeah, it's a 6-track EP, and it sort of tracks my progression as I'm thinking about different parts of my identity, whether that's, issues tied to my mental health or issues tied to growing up, growing older, issues tied to my status as a first-generation kid. So there's a lot of very personal stuff in there. But I think this EP is kind of like a way for me to transition into my album, which I'm planning to drop later on this year.
Cool. So how did you get started with making your own music and later get involved with Ithaca Underground?
Yeah, so in terms of making my own music, in high school, I had the kind of weird idea that I wanted to have a cartoon and a video game when I grew up, but I didn't know sort of how a person became like an animator or like a coder or any of those things. But I did know how to make music. Like my older brother, he's a self-taught guitarist, and he understands kind of music theory. So he taught me some basic things. He taught me how to use Reason, which is like a digital audio workstation that you can make beats on. I also purchased the video game MTV Music Generator. You can make beats on that for PlayStation. So I was making a lot of production, and I showed it to my friends. They were like, this is weird. And I was like, I guess it is kind of weird, but whatever. And then when I got to college, I first heard Kanye West, and he changed my life. And then I started making like sample-based hip-hop beats. And then after I graduated, I went to Cornell for undergrad. I started rapping when I was living in Houston, working as a teacher for Teach for America. So that's like the very abridged version of my story. But in terms of Ithaca Underground, I moved back up to Ithaca to pursue graduate school in 2011. And I remember when I came back up here, I was like, oh, I'll never make music again. There's not a scene for what I'm trying to do, which is like nerd raps that discuss race and gender and all of these different identity points. I just didn't think there would be an audience for that here based on my experience here at Cornell and even as an Ithaca resident. And then I started going to Ithaca Underground shows because a person in my department was part of a band at the time that was performing with them. And I remember speaking to Bubba, who's the president of the board, and saying, hey, I'll never put on any hip hop shows. And like he immediately got to work on changing that, which I think is so dope. I did not expect that kind of quick response. So within a couple months, he had booked a show with Milo, and he was like, I want you to open, for him. And so with that, I think the ball really got rolling. I was on the bill for like the Ithaca Festival through the IU stage. And since then, the partnership has just continued to build.
Cool. Well, do your current studies as a grad student right now in school inspire themes on your EP, or was it mostly drawn from your life outside of classes?
I would say this project definitely draws a lot on some of the things that I've been thinking about as I'm navigating graduate school. So the first single from the project is a track called 1080p, and it's about my like mental health and how a lot of things were put into question as I was navigating the PhD. So in that song, I'm really kind of calling out some of the like culture in academia around who should be there and who shouldn't, and what counts as proper knowledge. Those are some of the things that I'm concerned with. So in that regard, definitely things are coming up. But I think also just themes, questions, concerns that come up with me and my friends in the department. Like we talk a lot about like, how are you supposed to have it all? Like people talk about how you're supposed to, figure out somehow to have a balance between family and work, and that there are unique pressures, I think, for women who are pursuing graduate work or who are even professors at this point in terms of balancing all of that stuff. And you're supposed to have babies and, be successful and take on all these things. And I wanted to push back against some of that and say, well, success can look different for different people. So.
Cool. So you have a song on Infusion entitled The Feels, which is in reference to a frequently used Tumblr phrase. Could you elaborate more on your interest with internet culture and how it influences your songs?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always about a tricky balance because you don't want it to be so in the now that in a year people are like, I have no idea what this is referencing. So you're always trying to pick something that is important culturally enough that it will have some kind of lasting impact. But I also don't want to be sort of one of those rappers who's like, the only good rap in the world came from the 90s. Like, that's stupid. There's a lot of good music that's out right now coming from like really young people. I don't want to invalidate sort of the cool stuff that is, you know, emerging in terms of internet culture and different scenes. So that track in particular, I perform, when I perform, I get very emotional. And a lot of people were saying to me, oh, your set gave me the feels. I just kept hearing that. And so I was like, oh, okay, this is like an interesting way of talking about emotions. And I'm, you know, a hyper emotional person. So I think my using that phrasing wasn't directly tied to like me seeing it on the internet. It was more so in show context. So many people would tell me, oh, that made me have the feels. Or like on Twitter, they would tweet me, oh, I just saw your set and it gave me the feels. So yeah, that's kind of how that tied in terms of just like how internet culture plays into my music. I play around on the internet quite a bit. So certain phrases or ideas or kind of like memes or things that are funny, I'll definitely start to insert them in my music, but it's not sort of the basis behind some of the weightier stuff.
Nice. So recently you played at South by Southwest, which Ithaca's Izzy True also played at. How was the experience playing at that festival different from playing at IU shows?
Let's see. There were, well, it was interesting because I went to South by Southwest with my significant other. And so I think it was interesting because he's not in music. And so he was able to make observations about the scene that I actually kind of had overlooked because I was just interested in, you know, I perform, I get to hang out and chill. And the kind of takeaway from that experience was that especially with like the official showcases, even though there are a lot of dope acts, I think there can be a lot of ego. Like you don't find that kind of ego in IU shows. Like people take different places in different shows. So, you know, a person who's a headliner in one show might be an opener in another show. And there's no sort of like qualms about that. Even with Naked Noise coming up, you have artists who've been, you know, doing things for 15, 20 years. You have people who have just started off all on the same bill, all sort of being considered within the same regard. So I think at South by Southwest, it's like a lot of like hustling and like listen to my thing. I'm the most important artist that ever existed. And, you know, the unofficial showcases I think are pretty chill. Those were actually, I think, great spaces for artists like exploring themselves and just doing weird stuff. But I think that the room for experimentation is not necessarily there at South by Southwest because people are trying to get discovered or be like the next cool thing, which is not a problem, but it does constrain it in ways that I think IU is not constrained.
Cool. So are there any surprises? I know you're working toward your album.
Yeah. Are
there any surprises to come that you could share with us?
I think one thing about this forthcoming project that might surprise you. I don't even surprise is the right word, but I have a lot of features. That's something that I've kind of stayed away from for the past couple of projects. I'll have like one or two people maybe on a song, and I'm like very, very kind of cautious about that. But like in this, I wanted to like flex my like pendaflex muscles and show like the cool people that I know who are doing really cool things in music and just bring them on board because I feel like I've already shown sort of my skill set and I want to be able now to like introduce my listeners to new people and have the people that are rapping with me figure out kind of what's going on in my scene.
Right. Super fun. So excited and nice to have you here. Thank you.
Yay. Thanks for having me.
Coming up, we have some songs by Sylvan Esso and Benji Hughes. But first, here's 1080p by Sammus right here on VIC Radio's 50-Hour Marathon.